Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, an island show that endeavors to inform and hopefully also entertain. I'm Robin Adair, and speaking of entertaining, my co-host with the most, the Croatian sensation himself, John Jurisic. And John, boy, there's lots to talk about today, and I want to start maybe with entertaining those comments by Victoria Councillor Susan Kim.
We like to entertain you and I, don't we? But certainly her comments were the very last definition of entertainment. I can tell you, I can't get over the arrogance and the foolishness of rookie politicians when they get their first taste of power. Okay? Even on a very local level, Victoria City Council, under Marianne Alto's watch, have voted for a 7.93 tax percent increase, which is hefty in of its own, and a projected 53% increase over the next 5 years. Once again, pretty heavy lift. So taxpayers get to digest paying more now and in the future. They've been told, we want more of your money. But wait a second. Rookie Councillor Susan Kim decided to weigh in. She approved the 5-year plan. She voted for it. But she now says that she did it with reservations. She says this increase is far too low, Robin. Here's the way she sees it.
We as public government are the vehicle to transfer wealth to people who need it most, and I believe this is a lost opportunity. Listen, pundits, take this away. I'll aim for a 90, 95, 99% tax lift. Take it away. So, I mean, when you hear this sort of thing and it's being spoken in this way in a civic forum, somebody who believes clearly that we live in a class system and that the class and the wealthy and people who are in power are victimizing others and putting money in the pockets of the rich if we maintain this system. I mean, who does this sound like to you, John? It reminds me of something like Workers of the World Unite.
Robin, this directly reminds me of Karl Marx and communism. Susan Kim's radical thinking sounds exactly like communist dogma, wealth redistribution, and who makes the decisions about who is rich and who's poor. Is it really the role of government to decide if it's okay to be successful and reap the benefits of hard work and industry? Susan Kim should be ashamed, but I doubt highly that she is.
There certainly is a far left movement in our community and across our country. They make a lot of noise. Activists who want to bring down the system. They just don't like the way Canada is run. You see it very clearly amongst the ranks right now of some of the pro-Palestinian rally leaders and some of the people that march in those rallies and some of the language you hear there. And then you've got radicals like Charlotte Cates. She's an American expat living in Canada, talking about driving Israel out of the Middle East, the river to the sea. And she praises radical Islamic groups. Have a listen.
And that we stand with the Palestinian resistance and their heroic and brave action on October 7th. And they said, long live October 7th. And we say today, long live October 7th. Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Islamic Jihad is not a terrorist organization. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is not a terrorist organization. Hezbollah is not a terrorist organization. These are resistance fighters. These are heroes.
There's no question that this is crazy thinking. Folks state, I believe it, in a free society, people have a right to speak and say what they want. But I don't think they have the right to praise terrorists, criminals, or spew hate speech. If she was shouting in praise of Hitler or even Stalin, the government would shut her down. But for some reason, the Trudeau Liberals and EB-NDP are afraid to shut this kind of nonsense down.
You know, speaking of the New Democrats, I do think there is a radical left side to the Democratic Party, and they are actively involved right now. Some of these people, it's not a majority of NDPers by any means, but some of their members are actively involved in these pro-Palestinian protests. And neither the provincial nor the federal NDP are interested in rocking the boat and criticizing them, because they need those voters, they need that support, especially in BC as we head towards a provincial election. I know there are Conservatives who are on the far right. And traditionally, in the Conservative Party of Canada, when people get too far along, especially on social conservative issues, they get pushed to the side. It's been a big controversy on the right for quite some time. People traditionally who want to stay in power do everything they can to stay in the center, in the political center. So this takes us now to the BC Conservatives.
Yeah, you bet. John Rustad and those BC Conservatives have drawn away center-right support from Kevin Falcon and the BC United. And you wonder if their strong showing in the polls will hold till the election in the fall. A lot of BC Conservative views match Pierre Poilievre's messaging, like axe the tax.
John Rustad and the BC Conservatives certainly are a big player. They're a factor. And, the question is, where are they heading? Do they veer too far to the right? You have to wonder, could this hurt them in the long run? You wonder what people are thinking. We see some of the more recent polls where they are nibbling right on the heels of the NDP. Is this sustainable? Or is this just a temporary indication, perhaps by some polls, that the Conservatives are getting this strong? We asked Mark MacDonald from the Business Examiner, and he is also a former federal Tory candidate, what he thinks of the BC Conservative Party and whether they are, in his mind, real players.
I refer to the Conservatives as a circular firing squad, right? The Liberals will stick together no matter what because they want power, and the Conservatives, there's half the party saying, we're standing for what's right, and they lose part of the big picture is keeping the socialist hordes, as W.A.C. Bennett. I can almost see the hordes coming over the mountains. They've lost that, right? And so they get caught on this principles, whatever the principles are, and this is politics. It's not church. It's politics, and it's getting power and keeping it. And then from there, holding government, then you can affect the things that affect people in their paychecks.
Johnny, the way I see it, the BC Conservatives are very reminiscent of the old Social Credit Party. And, they focus on conservative values, hard work, smaller government. Those are all familiar themes. Those are things a lot of us grew up with the old Social Credit. And in fairness, BC United, which hasn't found its feet yet with its new name, its leader, Kevin Falcon, has always been considered more a conservative on the right side of that party, BC United, but they are also straddling being able to put down new policies while defending things that they formerly did when they were the BC Liberal Party. For example, they did bring in originally the first carbon tax, and they didn't solve the housing issue. They didn't solve the tent cities and all the crime when they were in power. And so in some ways, it makes it difficult for them to say, well, we didn't do it then, but now we can do it now. And it confuses their campaigning, I believe.
I agree with you. They're giving us mixed messages with confused objectives that seem to be differentiate from what they did when they were in power. However, this government, David Eby and the NDP, have launched a massive housing program, are in the process of backing off on the open use of narcotics. Oh my gosh, about time, because the public is upset about this. Are you nuts? Of course we are. And the election is looming in the fall. It's still looking like a comfortable New Democrat victory in the fall, but anything can happen. Anything can happen, as we all know in BC, when an election comes around.
Anything can and does happen in British Columbia politics. And clearly, somebody who's hoping to overcome all expectations is a fellow by the name of Tim Thielmann. He is a lawyer in Victoria, and there are plenty of things that you would say are working against him. He's a conservative a BC Conservative riding in Victoria Beacon Hill, which is well known as an NDP stronghold these days. He's up against Cabinet Minister Grace Lohr, who holds the seat now. Also running in that same riding will be the head of the Green Party. And Sonia Furstenau is going to take a lot of votes as well. So we have Tim Thielmann. He is very enthusiastic. Incidentally, he is legally blind, but he remains undaunted in the face of all these obstacles. Let's zoom him in. Now joining us in the Rumble Room for the very first time is the BC Conservative candidate for Victoria Beacon Hill, Tim Thielmann. Nice to have you on the program.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
You bet.
All right. We're interested in having you on. We're not planning on having all the candidates from all the ridings in the South Island because, frankly, there's other things we'd like to cover on this show. But we thought yours was a very interesting story because you're not what I consider the prototype of what a BC Conservative might be. You're a centrist. You've worked for years as a lawyer working with First Nations on, well, pipelines for one thing. And a lot of those sorts of things you don't classically think of as a BC Conservative. You might think of as being a car dealer or something like that. And on the other hand, there's other things that are going on now in the debate about BC conservatism and the BC United and how they differentiate. And are they the same party? And why aren't they working together? And why isn't there a coalition? So what's your feeling about the two parties? And why did you choose the BC Conservatives over BC United?
Yeah, thanks. So I've spent 15 years working for First Nations. I've been at the tip of the spear when it comes to the progressive movement. What I've seen over the last number of years, though, has really concerned me. I've seen extremists, basically on the far left, who don't believe in the rule of law, who don't believe in the fundamental values that underlie our society, take over the progressive movement and really most of the institutions in the Western world to a large extent. And it's only been until recently that I decided it was my turn to stand up, to say something about it, to do something about it. And it was really only the BC Conservative Party that had individuals that were willing to say the quiet things out loud, that were willing to speak out about some of these issues. And so I felt like it was a good home for me, even though I was not a typical conservative, as you mentioned. And now I feel like there's so many atypical conservatives that I'm meeting every day joining our movement, that it's the most exciting place to be in BC politics. There's some real hope for change, I think, right now.
Tim, this is very exciting. This is our first BC Conservative candidate. I'm sure we'll have several more, likely have yourself again. And why? I mean, you guys are, you're almost near the top. Oh my God. So we got to figure out what's going on. What are some of the policies? And I've got one for you.
Sure.
It appears that you guys are cozying up and emulating the federal Conservatives, even though the two organizations are completely separate. Getting rid of the carbon tax has been a big Pierre Poilievre campaign focus. And we do hear BC Conservatives also saying axe the tax at every whistle stop. But there are differences. For example, you don't hear Pierre Poilievre promising optional private health care. Why have you guys taken this stand?
Yeah, so I should say one thing first. The party, the Conservative Party of BC, has not tabled the healthcare platform yet. I, as a candidate, have been very outspoken about my personal views about healthcare, and they are that we need to have a hybrid system which builds on top of our public, universally accessible healthcare system by giving every citizen the right to access care, whether in the public or the private system. If you look at Australia, they've got a hybrid system, similar country to ours in terms of spending. They beat us in 33 out of 36 metrics, including wait times, including comprehensiveness of care, including equity for the people that can afford it the least. So they have an overall better system, and the same is true all the way across Europe. It's just madness to me that we are trapped in love with this healthcare system that's holding us hostage. I've called it Stockholm Syndrome in one of my videos, because it's just a delusion that we've been trapped within. And I think it's time. I mean, my dad is in ICU as we speak, and there's so many people like me who have horror stories about the healthcare system right now, and have been ready for a long time to tip over the sacred cows and do what needs to be done to fix the system.
And aside from healthcare, the number one issue, and the polls have been showing this, of decided voters in British Columbia right now is housing. And guess what? We have new housing proposals from David Eby's NDP government. Justin Trudeau just unveiled billions of dollars for housing coming out of Ottawa, including opening up Crown land and D&D property, which could be a big factor around Greater Victoria. What's your position about housing? How do you feel about this issue as number one?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I mean, I've talked to so many people in the last 4 months that are terrified because they can't afford rent, because there's nowhere else to go, because the rent in the places where they haven't lived for 10 years is twice as much. Just today, a report came out showing that rent in Victoria has doubled since 2018, from about $1,000 a month to over $2,000 a month. So, who broke it? David Eby and Justin Trudeau over the last 7-8 years. What are the primary causes of the increases in rent? Well, there's 4 big ones, right? Inflationary deficits. Governments spend and borrow money that we don't have. The Bank of Canada prints that money out of thin air, and it washes into scarce assets, primarily housing. So that's caused a huge gulf to open up in the inequality between people that have houses and other stocks and people that don't. I really do think it's important. So inflationary deficits, you've got immigration levels that are unsustainable, right? And that's largely outside of the province's hands. But there have been some fraudulent immigration post-secondary schemes, which I think the province can do more about, and that we would do more about as a government. Spending as well. I mean, obviously, we will be reining in the literally record-breaking deficits and debt that the NDP government has brought in over the last 7 years. So that will help over the medium term with housing. So, we do need to build more. We need to build smartly, and we need to reduce unsustainable forms of pressure on the housing market. And then there's money laundering. For decades, the BC Liberals and now the BC NDP have turned a blind eye to money laundering. That's bid up the price of housing in Vancouver and spillover effects here in Victoria. So we absolutely can do something about that.
Okay, well, so, we're going to get back to you on this one, because it is the number one issue. But let's switch to politics now. Okay,
sure.
Something Robin and I love. You're running in Victoria, Beacon Hill. You have to go back quite a way. 2001.
Correct.
When a center-right person, Representative 1, that was Jeff Bray, held it for the BC Liberals for one term. It's fair to say, look, we all know that Victoria really has become an NDP stronghold, and Beacon Hill is no exception. Plus, you're up against Grace Lohr, Minister of Children and Families. Now the Green leader, Sonia Furstenau, is also running. What are your chances for real, Tim? Tell us ahead of time.
Yeah. You tell me, John, do you think things are better today than they were in 2001 when Jeff Bray won? I don't think that they are.
I was about 10 years old. I don't think I can answer that question very well.
You were just acting like a 10-year-old, Johnny.
Yeah. That's right.
I'll tell you, the people that I talk to when I go door to door for the last 4 months, many of them are lifelong NDP voters. Many of them now pay 2/3 of their income in rent, and none of them are happy with Grace Lohr or the NDP. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Many of those renters are not happy with Grace Lohr and the NDP. And because it doesn't matter what color your party is when you can't pay the bills. And we're seeing that in polling as well, that the strongest demographic for our party, for the Conservative Party, is young people. Because for the first time in forever, young people don't have a hope right now of owning a home, starting a family in a home that they can own. So you will be surprised, I think, to see on October the 19th what the coalition of voters that line up behind me will look like. It's not the typical conservative alliance between the business community and sort of right of center free enterprise folks. It's a common sense coalition between working people, middle class people, people on the edge, and people that want to return to common sense. We're drawing across a wide spectrum. Add to that the fact that Sonia Furstenau and Grace Lohr will be splitting the left and lefter votes. And anything is up for grabs here. Anything can happen.
So, we wish Tim Thielmann all the best in this campaign. We wanted to bring him on because we thought, wow, there is the little engine that could. It's an interesting story. For the record, we're not going to be bringing all the candidates from all the parties onto the Rumble Room, but we thought this was an interesting story, so we'll follow it and see how he does. I want to finish up before we get to wrapping the Rumble Room, a little bit of a tribute to somebody who has just recently passed away, who I worked with in the old broadcast business. And this would be Hayden Thomas. We met in 1977, back when I was attending BCIT broadcasting. Later, we worked together for a time at CJVI AM 900. I was a program director, and he was the sidekick for Barry Bowman on the morning show. His wry wit and dry sense of humor certainly was his calling card in broadcasting. So he recently passed away at the age of 70. Condolences to his family. And, 70. It seems like an old age if you're a younger person, but for me, it feels like it's just around the corner. Very sad to see that. And John, on that note, time to wrap up another Rumble Room. You could again explain, if you would, how folks can follow our show.
Yeah, I'm also sad to hear from the passing of Hayden Thomas. I recall him on CFAX in those early days. Great humor, great balance to the morning show host at the time. We certainly appreciate that people follow us on so many platforms. We are continually startled by how many people listen to us. You can friend us on Twitter, which is where we're getting a bunch of action, obviously now known as X. Facebook is where all of our programs live, as well as YouTube. And you can also become friends or member of the Friends of Victoria, the Rumble Room, where you can chat about what we talk about. If you go and search for us under the group categories, we're also on, as I mentioned, YouTube. Subscribe, like, share. We have a ton of followers on TikTok and Instagram. The Rumble Room gets around. We even have a podcast capacity if you just want to listen to us. That's it for me for now, Robin. A huge believer in accountability. I'm a huge believer in capitalism. I remain your Croatian sensation and never a believer in higher taxes.
And the good news, John, is you're never taxing. I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on.